Imagine this. A huge condo project is finally done, but there's this pot of money, over 17 million pesos, just sitting in the developer's bank account. And a massive fight is breaking out over who actually gets a piece of it. This isn't just about the cash, though. It's a legal mystery that all comes down to a single clause, buried deep inside a contract that almost everyone overlooked.
Okay, so let's dive right into this legal puzzle. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the project and the promise, then uncover a surprise backroom deal. We'll watch the conflict explode, follow the fight through the courts, and finally, we'll see why, in the world of contracts, one sentence can truly be king.
All right, first things first, let's set the stage. Every story like this starts with a big project, and more importantly, a set of promises written down on paper. And listen, that piece of paper, it's not just a formality. No way. It's the official rulebook, the blueprint for the entire relationship between the parties. And as we're about to see, every single word in it matters.
So let's meet our main players. On one side, you've got Fort Bonifacio Development Corporation, or FBDC, a huge real estate developer. On the other, you've got MS Maxco, the construction company they hired to build the Bonifacio Ridge condominium. And it all kicked off on June 5th, 2000, when they signed what's called a trade contract to get the work started. Now, at the very heart of this entire mess is this concept called retention money. The easiest way to think about it is like an insurance policy for the developer. FBDC held back 5% of the total payment, basically saying, we'll give you this last chunk of cash later, but only after we're sure you fixed any construction problems that might pop up.
And we are not talking about pocket change here. The total amount FBDC was holding onto was over 17 million pesos. This is the prize. This is what everyone was fighting over.
Okay, so things seem pretty straightforward so far, right? Well, this is where a simple construction deal takes a very sharp and very unexpected turn. Turns out, MS Masco had its own money problems. They owed cash to other people, including two guys named Valentin Fong and Manuel Domingo. So they got creative. They drafted this document called a deed of assignment, which was basically a fancy IOU telling Fong and Domingo, hey, go collect your money from FBDC. They owe us, so consider it yours. And this chart gives you a pretty clear picture of what was on the line for these new players. MS Maxco essentially signed away a claim for over 1.5 million pesos to Fong and another for about 800,000 to Domingo, all supposed to be paid out of that big pot of retention money FBDC was holding.
So you can imagine what happened next. Fong and Domingo showed up at FBDC's door, paperwork in hand, thinking they were about to get paid. But instead of a check, they hit a brick wall. A firm, resounding no. And FBDC wasn't just saying no for no reason. They had their arguments lined up. First, they said, that money, it's gone. We had to spend millions fixing all the shoddy work MS Maxco did. Second, whatever was left has already been claimed by other creditors with court orders. But here was the real knockout punch, the crucial point. Our contract explicitly says MS Maxco can't assign their rights without our written consent. And guess what? We never gave it. Well, that refusal kicked off an all-out legal war. Fong and Domingo sued, absolutely convinced they had a right to that money. And this case started its long journey up the legal ladder, going from the lower courts all the way to the Philippines Supreme Court. This just goes to show how a simple commercial dispute can turn into a landmark case. This decision, FBDC versus Fong, got published in the official Philippine reports. That's a big deal. It means it set a major legal precedent that would be cited for years to come. And the legal tug of war here was fascinating. At first, the lower courts actually sided with Fong and Domingo. See, they were looking at a general principle of law that says, basically, all you need to do to assign a credit is notify the debtor. Since FBDC was notified, the lower court said, you got to pay him. But then the Supreme Court got the case, and they looked right past the general rule and focused like a laser on one specific thing, the contract itself. So what was it? What did the Supreme Court see that the lower courts missed? What was the one key detail that completely flipped this entire case on its head? It was this, Clause 19.1.1 of the original trade contract. Just read it. The trade contractor shall not, without written consent of the client, assign or transfer any of his rights. Boom. That one sentence, probably buried pages deep in the fine print, was the legal smoking gun. The Supreme Court's logic here was simple but incredibly powerful.
They said that when Fong and Domingo accepted that assignment from S. Moscow, they were effectively stepping into MS Moscow's shoes. That means they didn't just get the good parts, like the right to collect money. No, they were also stuck with all of MS Moscow's obligations and limitations, including that little rule about needing FBDC's written consent first.
This whole case is a perfect textbook example of a legal doctrine called the relativity of contracts. It's a fancy-sounding name, but it boils down to this. The rules of the game set by the original contract travel with any rights that get transferred. You can't just take the prize and leave the rules behind.
And if you want to see the power of this ruling, just look at the timeline. Remember there were 2 creditors? In 2015, the Supreme Court ruled against Fong. Then, 7 years later, when Manuel Domingo's nearly identical case finally reached the top court, the outcome was pretty much a done deal. The court just applied the precedent from the Fong case and ruled against Domingo too. That's the power of precedent right there.
So what's the big lesson here? What do we take away from all this? First, the specific words you agree to in a private contract can actually be more powerful than general laws. Second, if you're ever on the receiving end of an assigned right, you have to understand every single condition that comes with it. And finally, it's a huge reminder that the fine print isn't just fine print. In this case, it was literally everything.
Which leaves us with a final thought. We think of contracts as being between just 2 parties. But as this case shows, their effects can ripple outwards, binding people who were never even in the room when the thing was signed. So the next time you look at a contract, maybe ask yourself, who else's shoes is this contract really walking in?